Hello card fighters, welcome back to another set review. Last time we looked at Destructive Roar, and this time we're going to look at the upcoming booster set Champions of the Aces Circuit that will be dropping in about 2 weeks in Europe and in Americas. And today we're going to discuss the first clan of that set, and that's going to be Aqua.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Aqua is currently in an awkward situation with all the bad negative feedback that's given to the community about the upcoming support within the standard format. But today we're going to discuss if that's actually the case, or it's just a diamond in the rough that still needs to be polished good enough to see their full potential. So without further ado, let's jump right into the set review. Alright, first off we got the vanilla triggers. Just as like all the other clans, I gave them all 2 stars. Next up, we have the starter of Aqua, that is Officer Cadet Eric. And like all the other first starters, I give this one 4 stars. Alright, next up we got Battle Siren Dorothea. And yes, we're going blazing fast through these set reviews. Her skill is that you can give 8k away to any unit on the field for Counterblast 2. And giving 8k away is pretty good in Aqua because you have rearguards like Tidal Assault or Algos, or in combination with the grade 3 Navalgazer Dragon, you can restand that rearguard. So effectively you can gain not 8k but potentially 16k or 24k depending on how many times that unit is going to be attacking. But at the same time, the Counterblast 2 is pretty heavy in Aqua because a lot of other cards are counterblasting or relying to multi-tag or getting power or some kind of other advantageous effect. And that's why this card doesn't really fit well within the grade 1 spot, and also the 7k base doesn't really help it that well. So because the cost is very heavy and there are other cards that can do the same thing in a better scenario and have a higher base power, I give this one 1 star because it's not really, doesn't fit that well within the deck. Alright, next up we got the normal Perfect Guard, the Sentinel grade 1, 2 stars for this one. Alright, next up we got Tier Knight Theo. And his skill is a little bit similar to Dorothea that can give 8k away to a unit. Well, in his case it doesn't need to counterblast for it, it only needs to hit in the attack on wave 2nd or more when it attacks or boosts it. So it's pretty resourceful in that case that it doesn't really have to boost, it can also attack. And wave 2nd or more isn't really that hard to acquire because you always have a Vanguard, so it can be the 2nd attack after that and give it to the 3rd unit that's standing by to attack after that. So it's pretty decent in that regard. And giving hit pressure, a lot of people don't really like on hit effects, but with the other on hit effects, like in combination with Maelstrom that gives another hit effect on the 3rd and 4th attack, you can get a pretty decent lineup with all hit effects. And in some cases your opponent cannot guard all the cards and they need to decide which one they want to let through. And if you have this one behind your Vanguard, in most cases they want to let this one through because resending your Vanguard is a lot tougher for most people. But then again, you can give 8k to another unit that can become a really powerhouse with multiple attacking, or just a very strong unit with another grade 3, Riptide Dragon, what we're going to discuss very soon. So, because you can really use this card in a lot of different ways and the hit pressure can be really useful in the current deck, and I believe in upcoming Aqua deck it's pretty good, decent grade 1. So I give it the 4 stars because it fits pretty good in the deck and it's really good in the regard to how Aqua is dealing with troubles making power columns. Alright, next up we got the vanilla grade 1, and just like the Tachikaze version, I give this one 3 stars, works really well in the deck, can make magic numbers, and it's very good with early guard potential. Alright, next up we got Tier Knight Lazarus, the grade 2 vanilla 12k attacker, because it becomes a 12k on wave, the 2nd wave of that turn, but only on the 2nd wave. And I don't really like this card because, sure, it gains power for free, it doesn't cost any counterblast, but there are other good grade 2 options like Algos, Tidal Assault, Shotgun Assault, to name a couple. And those can become a lot powerful, and some, even if they're 9k base, with the help of Maelstrom that's counterblast, they become 12k on their own. Sure, this can become a 15k attacker, but again, apparently it's only on the 2nd wave, so it's very limited in when you can use it. And especially when we get more cards in the future for Aqua, this card won't stand a chance when there's other vanilla cards that can do things for free, because the extra 3k isn't really that special, because it doesn't hit the boundary of a Force clan. It can hit an Exo clan, but then again other cards can do the same thing. So that's why I give this card only 2 stars. Alright, next up we got Shotgun Assault. And basically he can do also the 8k power increase, but only on himself for a Soul Blast. And it's on attack when it's attacked in Vanguard, so you cannot use it on the rear guard. But then again, it's pretty useful to become a 70k, and on an Axle circle it becomes a 27k for a Soul Blast, so it doesn't cost a Counter Blast. And that's very helpful for saving your Counter Blast, because those are limited, and you can rewrite to gain your soul, and you have another great one, Bibiana, I'm going to talk about later, that can also go into the soul. So for a Soul Blast for gaining 8k is a pretty decent trade-off. So I give this card 3 stars because it's pretty good to have a lot of power gain ability with a lot of different resources than only Counter Blast. So very good card. Not great, but it's pretty decent. Alright, next up we got Algos, the main guy of the trial deck. And basically this card I think is going to be the next staple within Aqua Force for a long time. What Tidal Assault was in G era, because every Aqua Force deck has a Tidal Assault in it. I think this is going to be the next version of that in the standard format. Because like Tidal Assault, it can restand on the rear guard. When it attacks on the first wave Counter Blast 1, it restands. And it doesn't have to attack the Vanguard, so you can even restand while attacking the rear guard. And it's once per turn, and with the new ruling you can depend on how you want to use it, but it's only the first attack. So in that regard it's a little bit limited. But the other skills, when it's on the Vanguard, you can Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, and when it's attack on the second wave, restand the rear guard. And that means that this card is in every situation pretty good with with aggression, because when you have another rear guard, you can attack with rear guard, then discard, restand the rear guard, and attack again. And if your opponent got a trigger, you can attack the rear guard in that case. And the problem with Tidal Assault is sure, it's an amazing rear guard, but it loses power. Well, this one doesn't lose power, so that's already a big plus. But it also, when you write a Tidal Assault, because you didn't have any other rear guard, then the power of the card is lost, because it's a pure rear guard skill. But Algos is also very strong on the rear guard circle, on the Vanguard circle, as on the rear guard circle. That makes it even a higher utility card. And because of that, I give this card 5 stars, because it's very useful in basically in almost every case scenario. And I think this is going to be the next staple within Aqua Force for a very, very long time. Alright, next up we got the Vanilla Grade 3, and that is Marine General of the Raging Waves, Gondicus. And it's basically similar to how Maximum Riser works, that when it's not boosted it gains power, but instead that it gains 10, it only gains 5k. But Maximum Riser didn't have an Axle marker, and this card does. So basically, Bushiroad is telling us that they think a gift marker on a card is the same trade-off as gaining 5k power. So that's very interesting, is what that's going to bring to card designs in the future. Because we see a very good example of a card with a similar skill, but the one gets the gift marker and the one doesn't get the gift marker. So very interesting where that's going. But the card on its own is pretty terrible. It doesn't really help Aqua Force that much. Gaining Axle circles isn't really that much of a priority, and the 5k when it's not boosted doesn't really... Yeah, you basically want your other grade 3s and your other grade 2s doing the job. So I give this one 1 star. But it's interesting to see how the power balance with gift markers and power on the card works out. So for future comparison, this is very handy. Alright, we got the main grade 3 of the boss monster of the trial deck, and that's Navalgazer Dragon. And this is a similar skill to what Perfect Riser is. It can restand rear guards, only it's 1 Counter Blast, so starving this card Counter Blast starving this card is a lot harder than it was with Perfect Riser, and it only stands 1 rear guard, so that's the trade-off. But then again, the Vanguard itself gains the 10k power, and that's very interesting that it does not give the power to the rear guard. And I'm very happy that they give the power to the Vanguard instead of the rear guard, because your rear guards are just poke numbers, and your Vanguard needs to have some threat to it itself. And if it was a 12k against a 13k base, then in most cases it's just putting a heal trigger on the field, and it's no pass, because you can never hit with double trigger hitting that power when they're guarding with 20k shield. But because it gains a 10k, it's always a possibility that it can hit. Meaning that this card is always something to be scared against your opponent when they're sitting on a Force Vanguard 13k base. So that's why this card is very useful in that case. And I give it 4 stars, because resetting your rear guard is very handy, is very strong. Also the power helps a lot. And yeah, it does what it needs to do, and it's a very good card to sit on when you're stuck on your grade 3, because it always puts out pressure, and it's a very good end game card when your opponent is sitting on 5 damage, unlike the VR of this set, but we're coming to that at the end of this video. Alright, next up we get to the cards of the set itself, because we already discussed the trial deck cards, and that is Influent Dagger. And Influent Dagger is basically just a 10k attacker when it attacks the Vanguard, and on the third battle or more, so it's even higher restriction in that regard. And because of that, I really don't like the card itself, because becoming a 10k when it attacks is not really that special. Yeah, if you put it on extra circle, it becomes 20k, but then again, the grade 2 can do the same thing with a lot with restanding or other pressure cards, and it's also 7k base grade 1. So it doesn't really help with defense options, so I give this one 1 star. I don't think anybody's going to run it, maybe in a budget deck, but then again, Aqua Force itself is currently a budget deck on its own, because I think the cards aren't really that valuable in Japan as it is, and maybe in Europe when the set released. So only 1 star for this one. Alright, next up we got Storm Rider Basil. And Basil is one of those counterblast grade 2s that we discussed in the beginning of this video, and his way of using his skill is he can either get 5k or 10k power, depending on which battle you're attacking the Vanguard. If it's the third battle or more, it gets 5k power, and if it's the fourth battle, so 1 wave later, it gets 10k instead of the 5k. So it's not 5k and then 10k, it's 5k or 10k. So it can become a 40k attacker or a 90k attacker, and respectively on the extra circuit can become a 24 or 29. And if you combine it with, you can even combine it again with Maelstroms, so it gets another 3k. So for 1 counterblast, it can become pretty high, decent numbers. And it's a pretty decent card. It's sadly it's a counterblast to gain some power and not other useful utility effect. But then again, it's the first set, and most grade 2s, we already got 2 amazing grade 2s in the form of Tidal Assault and Algos. So this is pretty decent, and that's why I give it 3 stars. Alright, next up we got Riptide Dragon. And this is basically the gift markerless grade 3 of the clan. But if regardless that it doesn't have a gift marker, this is basically a card that you want to run in your deck, because it's an insane powerhouse. It has a restriction that you can only attack on the 4th wave or more. But then again, that isn't really that hard to do, because you can restand rearguards with your Vanguards, and other rearguards already restand, and you have multiple front row circles. But the amazing effect of this card is that when it attacks the Vanguard, or just attacks in general, then it gains another 20k power increase. So it becomes, instead of a 12k attacker, it becomes a 32 attacker without the help of anything. Then if you combine it with, let's say, Navalgazer Dragon that restand that thing, and then you have 2 amazing, incredible columns that attacks twice. And if you put it onto an Axel circle, it gains another 10k power. So the thing swings for 42 on its own. So that's incredibly high numbers, and it can give a lot of pressure on your opponent, because Aqua Force isn't really that known for high column numbers, usually only poke numbers for 13, 9, 9, 12 and those kind of things. But this thing can generate an enormous high power number for the late stages, where you want to force the 6 damage, when you're already putting on 5, and you want to force then the less perfect guards or the less high guard cards from their hand. And this card does the trick and does the thing that you want to do it. And that's why I give it 4 stars, because it really fits into the end game stages of where Aqua Force sometimes struggles to give the decisive blow, and especially with all the on-hit effect that gives them the pressure they need. And when they are sitting on 5 damage, you're not really going to get your hit effects, because if you're getting those hit effects, then you basically already won the game unless they got a heal trigger. Alright, next up we got the countercharge card for Aqua Force, and that is Light Signal Pinging Soldier. And this card has 2 interesting effects. One is that you can rest it and you can give the unit in the same column plus 5k power, but you rest it so you're losing an 8k booster, so that sounds bad, but if you combine it with something that restands, then it's not a plus 5k power in overall attack, but a plus 10k power because it restands. And if you restand that thing again with Navalgazer, that's another 5k that you gained on pressure against your opponent. So that makes this card very strong and very useful on different kind of occasions where you want to force a lot of options to attack. And the reason why you want to use this effect, that you rest it because it's not boosting, is because the other skill is that you can retire it when you're attack on the 4th battle. So it doesn't need, you just need to hit the 4th wave. And when you do that, you can retire it and countercharge 1. So it basically enables you to still use its power, the 8k base, by resting it, giving the power away on the unit, and then retire it later when you're hitting the null street waves to get the countercharge. So that's why it's a very useful card that can give a lot of pressure on your opponent, but also regain some resources that you need for other cards like Maelstrom or Algos or Navalgazer Dragon and all the other specific cards that focus around the Counterblast engine. So that's why this is definitely a 4-run must in most decks. So that's why I give it a 5-star card, because it's a very useful card in basically every situation that Aqua Force needs to use that thing. So that's why it's a very good card to run in your deck. Alright, next up we've got Trident Shooter. And this is a very interesting card that is some reminiscent of the old skills that Aqua Force was known for by swapping rearguards from circles to circles, by swapping the front row to the back row and whatnot. But there's a little gimmick to this one, and that's the fact that it can only swap with another unit if it was on an additional circle, meaning that it needs to be on an axial circle, not the original circles. And that's pretty decent, because you get the extra 10k off that circle, because an axial circle is plus 10k. And that's very, if you think about that, it's basically Counterblast, Soul Blast, and gain an extra 10k on a unit. The problem is with this card is that it only works on the additional circle. So the moment that you swap this thing with another rearguard on the normal circle, you cannot use this card again for that match, because the card is stuck on the normal circle and it's just a 9k vanilla do nothing. And you can work around it when you run multiple things, multiple cards of these, and you have one in the back row behind your Vanguard maybe, and then this on the axial circle, and then you can keep swapping these every turn by use to basically have one on the additional circle and one behind the Vanguard, and every time you swap them, so they can both attack, but every turn you can swap them again, because one is always on the additional circle. But the Counterblast Soul Blast is pretty heavy for only 10k increase, and we have seen other cards that can, for only Soul Blast, get an 8k, or for one Counterblast gain 10k and restand the unit, like Navalgazer, or Counterblast 1 to restand itself. That's basically plus 10k attack, because they sell for over 10k. So that's why I don't think it's a very good, decent card, and that's why I only give it 2 cards, because I don't see it really works that well in the current build of Aqua Force, because counterblasting and soul blasting is pretty. Alright, next up we got the Sentinel Perfect Guard, and that's Paschal in this case, Emerald Shield Paschal. And just like the other ones, I give this one 5 stars. Alright, next up we've got Battle Siren and Bibiana. And this is the one that I talked about that could go into the... At first I didn't really like this card, because it doesn't really generate that much. It gained, when it boosted on the 3rd attack or more, you could put it in the soul draw card, and one of your units gains plus 3k power until the end of the turn. So basically it's a cycle card, because you put her in a soul and get a new draw, and you give a unit plus 3k. That on its own wasn't really that I like, oh, that's a pretty decent effect for a double rare. Why is it a double rare? But then when I thought about it, a lot of cards use soul, so you need to have some way to regenerate your soul, and you can rewrite for that, but to a certain extent, are you capable of doing that? And so, and seeing as this is the only card that can go into the soul, it's basically your only soul charge option. And because of that, this card suddenly jumps from valuable in the deck, from basically, it's okay, to, alright, you need this thing in your deck if you want to keep sustaining the aggression on your opponent. So that's why I give this card 4 stars, because you need the soul for things like Trident Shooter, for Shotgun Assault. If you're running maybe Trident Shooter, you need it for that. You need it for Tidal Assault, because it's now in Soul Blast. So if you when you combine it with all those cards, then you can see why this going into the soul is very useful, and the fact that you get another card back is very handy. And also the plus 3k can help hitting some magic numbers if you're putting it on a restanding rearguard that also got a 3k from Maelstrom, and some other effect that also gave it another 5k, maybe from Soldier Pack. Alright, next up we've got the new version of Tidal Assault, and it works in a somewhat similar way of the old version that we're used to in the GR, but there are some important differences of how the skill works. In the old version it was at the end of the battle that attacked the Vanguard, you can restand it, or basically you must restand it and it gains minus 5k power. This one works by when it attacks, you need to Soul Blast 1 and then it restands. So before that the attack even is calculated, the damage step or anything for drive checking, if it could be a Vanguard, but this is a rearguard. So before anything happens, before your opponent can guard, you already need to pay the cost and restand it. And the other second part of the effect is if it's wave 2nd or more, it will lose minus 5k power. Meaning that if you attack with it on the wave, let's say wave 3, and you attack and you use its skill to restand it, your Soul Blasting 1, it gains minus 5k. But it's the minus 5k before the attack is even calculated against your opponent. So when it was maybe 14k against a 13k base Vanguard, you attack, use its skill, it suddenly drops to 9k. So it doesn't hit the Vanguard anymore. So instead, with the old Tidal Assault, where only the second attack was weaker, in this case, when you use it late game, both attacks become weaker. So you need to keep paying attention of how this card works with the effect. But regardless of that, I still think it's an amazing card that can give a lot of pressure, because on the first wave, it just Soul Blast and restands on its own. And the fact that it's you can force it without losing power, it's in some cases even better than the old Tidal Assault, because the old Tidal Assault, you needed to use the restand skill and lost the power, and you couldn't really hit anything. And now you can still hit the Vanguard, hit the rearguard, or do some other shenanigans. And even if you lose the 5k power late game, we are already used to the fact that it loses 5k power. And paying a Soul Blast is, sure, it's a nerf to the card, but then again, I think it's a good thing that they did it, because Tidal Assault was too much of key pieces to any kind of Aqua Force deck that it was a mandatory card to run, and in some time in G era it was really pain in the ass to start Aqua Force, because you needed to get this card and it was basically not possible to get it. Thank God we got some reprints and we got a revival collection for it, but I think they've learned from their mistake and give a skill like that in some way as something like a cost. So still again, 5 stars, very good card. I'm happy that they changed the skill a little bit to make it a more interesting way to work around than just vanilla, attack the Vanguard and gains minus 5k and restand it. There's a skill roof to this card now, and especially in combination with the other card. Alright, next up we've got Diamantes, the other grade 3 high rarity card in the set. And its skill is pretty much similar to Tidal Assault, but he also got another skill. And that's when on the first battle it gains a 3k. So it becomes a 50k attacker. I don't really think you're going to use that skill a lot, because the first battle are either Tidal Assault or Algos if you run those cards in your deck. And if you don't have them, then sure, this can become your first attack for the turn. But the other skill on the card is the one that's similar to Tidal Assault. And that's when it's a third battle or more of the turn, you can counterblast 1, discard a card, it stands, and it gains power minus 3. So minus 3k. And so it's basically the same cost of, a similar cost to Tidal Assault, only instead of a Soul Blast, it's a counterblast and you need to discard a card. But it's a higher base power on its own, because Aqua Force Tidal Assault loses 5k and becoming a 4k attacker because it was a 9k unit. And this one becomes a 9k attacker twice instead of a 12k attacker. But you can make a 12k again with a combination of Maelstrom skill. So in some regard it's pretty good, pretty useful in how you want to use it, and the way that the waves are generated and how all the skills work out. So it's a pretty decent card that can be used in multiple scenarios. It can only restand late game, in the late stage of your turn, because only on the skill's only active on wave 3 or more. But it can become a very high beat stick on the first attack. And that's also something that Aqua Force really needs if they want to hit that last 6 damage. So that's why I give this card 4 stars, because it also has the give marker, it can resend, so it can force multiple attacks off, it can also be used as a somewhat higher value column generator. So it's very useful in basically in multiple ways that Aquaforce needs a card to function. So that's why it's a 4-star card that's very useful in multiple scenarios. Alright, and we are going to end it off with the VR. Basically the most infamous card, I think, of this set, and especially for Aquaforce, and that is Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom. And Maelstrom has 2 skills. The first one is act counter +1, give the entire front row a +3k. And we have seen the skill with the latest release currently with Pale Moon. That's basically the same skill, but they got it for free, so what's up with that, Bushiroad? But still, again, it's decent. It helps us turning all the 9k attackers into 12k attackers, or even other magic numbers. If you combine it with the other skills, it gives away 8k or 5k or whatnot. But the other skill is the interesting part of this card. And that's the fact that once per turn, when one of your rear guards hits on wave 3 or 4, you can discard 2 cards and restand the Vanguard. So you can restand this thing. And that's actually, in my opinion, a pretty decent effect to get for Aquaforce. Because a lot of people think it's a really terrible card for VR. Because when your opponent is sitting at 5 damage, there's no way that you're going to use the skill, because they need to hit with the rear guard, and meaning that they're going to win on that attack. So it doesn't really give so much pressure on this, basically on the 5th or 6th damage turn. And that's why most people really prefer Navalgazer Dragon, because Navalgazer Dragon is going to always generate pressure on your opponent, because no matter what the situation is, you're going to restand the rear guard and it's going to gain 10k power. But the way how I see this card is that this card is amazing in the mid-game scenarios, where your opponent is still sitting at 3 or 4 damage, and you're still capable of hitting with your rear guards. And if you combine it with let's say Theo and another wave 1 attacker that can restand, you can basically have a good lineup with a lot of pressure on basically every wave from wave 1 to around wave 4. So your opponent is forced to guard everything, but if they're sitting at 3 or 4 damage, they basically have guarded early game to sitting on a low damage count, meaning they cannot guard anymore or basically effectively everything. So something is going to hit. So they need to decide which effect is less hassle to deal with. And that's something that's very good to be able to capable of in Aquaforce. And also very other thing to this card is, I think it's a very good strong card that Aquaforce needs in some special occasions when, let's say, you're already in the somewhat in the late stage of the game, you're both at grade 3, but for some reason your opponent is sitting at 1 damage. And they still have a decent hand size, so they can keep defending your aggro turns. If they in the past, when they didn't have a card like this, that's basically a death sentence for Aquaforce. There's no way they're going to pressure them again to 6 damage, because they can easily take damage, guard the ones that they need to guard, and maybe get a lucky trigger, and then your turn is over. Aquaforce is only dangerous when your opponent is sitting at 4 or 5 damage, where they don't have the luxury to easily take an attack, because taking attack meaning they're going to die. And so in those scenarios where they only have 1 or 2 damage, Aquaforce isn't really that threatening anymore. But Maelstrom changed that around, because even if they're sitting at 1 or 2 damage, they cannot allow to easily let some attacks through, because the Vanguard's going to restand again, and they're going to attack again with a twin drive. So getting a crit or something is very feasible in that case. So they can easily swing from 1 damage to 5. And that's something you don't want to have against Aquaforce. So in that regard, I think it's a very useful card in those kinds of scenarios. It's not going to be your main finisher of the deck, but it functions well and fits well with all the scenarios that Aquaforce needs to deal with. Because without this card, I think there's a lot of pressure capability that Aquaforce needs that's not there. But it's a matter of opinion in that regard, and a matter of how you want to perceive things and how things work out with the meta and with all the other current decks. And I'm well aware that this is not something that you can set aside to something like Waterfall Dragon or Imperial Daughter or Great Dayusha, what we're going to talk about in not the next video but the one after that, the VR for Dimension Police. Those are way levels apart from each other, but it's still a decent card. So this is, I think, the first VR that I'm not going to give 5 stars, but I'm still going to give it a 4-star rating because it's still a decent card. Those were all the cards for Aquaforce that I got in this set, Champions of the Aces circuit. And to the surprising, they don't really have a lot of 5-star rating cards, especially not on the Great Freeze. And for some that can be surprising, that really doesn't, aren't familiar with Aquaforce themselves. But Aquaforce on its own, it's not really, it hasn't been a clan that revolves around the Vanguard. It's always been a clan that revolves around the rearguards. And you can see it with Elgos and Tidal Assault and all the other Great Freeze that work on the rearguard circle that are very useful, that get a lot of higher ratings on their own. And the rearguards themselves are very high rated in contrast to other clans where the rearguard ratings are a bit lower and the Vanguard cards are the ones that are rating high. Because Aquaforce is a rearguard-centric clan, it's a rearguard-centric focused clan. And that's very seenable in this set, and how the cards work and how the clan is going to be piloted and how you're going to need to be able to deal with the clan itself. Because Nova Grappler has always been annoying with the rearguards, but I think Aquaforce is going to be even more hassle to deal with because the rearguards are even more impactful for the game than what Nova Grappler was. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this set review. I'm very curious of what your opinions are on the cards, so leave them down in the comments down below, and let's start the discussion of what you think of Aquaforce. Is it a terrible clan with terrible set releases in this set, or do you think, well, it's pretty decent, or it just needs that one little card or those 2 key pieces to put it onto the same plateau to deal with things like Oracle Think Tank or Dimensional Police or Grand Blue? So let me know in the comments what you think. I'm Mr. Time Leap, and see you guys in the next one.